On this Saturday night, trouble at the top of Canada's most high-profile Indigenous organization. National Chief of the Assembly of First Nations suspended over allegations of bullying. Why the first woman to hold the role says she's the victim of a smear campaign. Unpacking airport chaos and cancellations as COVID restrictions lift.
And we're doing everything we can to ease those bottlenecks.
The Transportation Minister's plan to make travel enjoyable again.
People are often surprised that, that guy was scared to leave his house.
Focusing on men's mental health this Father's Day. The HGTV star smashing the tough guy stereotype and speaking about his own journey. And a cyclist, his cello, and a ride through the former Roman Empire. The British man creating his own sweet soundtrack on the bike ride of a lifetime.
Global National with Farah Nasser.
Good evening, and thank you for joining us tonight. We begin with a growing leadership crisis in Canada's largest and highest profile Indigenous group. The Board of Directors for the Assembly of First Nations says they've now suspended National Chief Roseanne Archibald over complaints about bullying behavior. But as Mike Drolet reports, Archibald says she's being targeted by a smear campaign, and she's pledging not to step down from the job she was just elected to a year ago.
The beginning of the summer solstice is a traditional time for many Indigenous groups to celebrate their culture through song and dance, not the political drama that has consumed the Assembly of First Nations.
Politics is a place where this doesn't belong.
AFN National Chief Roseanne Archibald, the first woman to lead the AFN, has long fought to make the organization more inclusive and transparent. On Thursday, Archibald tweeted she was the victim of a smear campaign while calling for a forensic audit and independent inquiry into the conduct of the AFN over the last 8 years. Without giving details, the AFN Executive Committee revealed it would be looking into complaints that had been made against Archibald. Archibald responded by saying she would shine a light on corruption and collusion within the AFN. That ultimately led to her suspension for unfounded and unsubstantiated public attacks on the integrity of the AFN. Russell Diabo, who worked under two national chiefs in the 1980s and 90s, says it appears to him that elements within the AFN were uncomfortable with her allegations.
That's clear. So what is it that they're afraid of? What is it the executive committee and this chief executive officer are afraid of in terms of an audit or an investigation into AFN's where did that money go and how was it used?
Archibald says she's not backing down, but where she goes from here is unclear. In addition to her suspension, the AFN executive has banned her from attending its annual General Assembly in July, which Diabo believes is an overreach.
But to say she can't, she's suspended and she can't go to the National Assembly, I think that's way beyond the scope of their authority. And I think there will be consequences. That meeting in Vancouver, mark my words, it's going to be very hot and heavy.
But will it provide the clarity the AFN so desperately needs? Mike Drolet, Global News, Toronto.
When Russia invaded Ukraine, thousands of volunteers from around the world, including right here in Canada, headed to the region to take up arms for Ukrainian independence. Now, it's believed some 2,000 of those international volunteers have been killed in the fighting. An unknown number of others have been captured. And as Sean O'Shea reports from Kyiv, they are facing uncertain fate.
With their hands bound, the men were marched down a hallway. 2 Americans now in the clutches of Russian soldiers who control part of eastern Ukraine. 39-year-old Alexander Druki, a retired Army sergeant, and 27-year-old Andy Hun, a retired Marine.
I mean, they don't look bad. They look good. They don't look injured. So I think that's actually quite promising if it turns out to be real.
The 2 men from Alabama went missing June 9th. In the Russian video, Druki apparently talks about their military assignment with some help from an interrogator.
Task Force Baguette.
Task Force Baguette.
Baguette, yes. And they were attached to the Ukrainian army. They were a recon unit.
Prisoners can often be forced to give information or make false statements in videos like these. Hun is heard describing why he signed up.
Was back in America before I left. I was watching at the time a lot of propaganda from the Western side.
Another American fighter is also missing.
I have been briefed. We don't know where they are.
U.S. President Joe Biden told reporters Americans should not be volunteering to help Ukraine.
But I want to reiterate, Americans should not be going to Ukraine now. Say it again, Americans should not be going to Ukraine now.
2 Britons and a Moroccan have received death sentences after pleading guilty to charges they fought against Russia in eastern Ukraine.
Do you know you indictment?
Yes. The European Court of Human Rights has told the Russian government the sentences should not be carried out. Russian President Vladimir Putin didn't mention the Americans' arrests during a speech at the St. Petersburg Economic Forum. But Russia's foreign ministry spokesperson said everything needed to solve the issue with the U.S. government is in place. There are thousands of volunteer foreign fighters here in Ukraine from various countries, including Canada. They'd also be in a vulnerable position if captured. Our government has said it's an individual decision on whether to come here and fight. Farah.
Sean O'Shea reporting for us from Kyiv. Thank you for your coverage, Sean. Traveling through an airport these days is not for the faint of heart. With summer around the corner and the removal of more public health restrictions, many Canadians are now itching to get away. And that's leading to long lines at airports and passport offices. Now, the government is being urged to fix the problem. Our Ottawa Bureau Chief Mercedes Stephenson spoke with Canada's Transportation Minister about these ongoing issues. Mercedes.
Farah, with the peak summer travel season starting next week, the federal government has been under fire for a slow response to COVID chaos at Canadian airports and under pressure to make changes fast to get travel back on track. In a bid to turn things around, the government suspended domestic vaccine mandates to board planes and trains, and the mandate for outbound international flights is heading for the departure gate too. But a number of mandates will remain, including the controversial Arrive Can app, used to document vaccination for incoming travelers to Canada. It has been criticized as confusing, time-consuming, and forcing border guards to act as IT support. Border city mayors and business groups are calling for the removal of the app. But this week on the West Block, Transport Minister Omar Alghabra says no dice on tossing the app, defending it as a valuable tool to verify vaccination status. He says the government will work to improve the troubled tech.
We are working with public health agency, we are working with CBSA, we're working with airports and with travelers and border communities to ensure how we can improve compliance of Arrive Can. Today we have over 90% compliance rate.
The vaccine mandate for inbound travelers to Canada will stay in place. Over 100 other countries have removed it, but keeping the requirement keeps Canada in step with the United States. Minister Alghabra also defended the government's slow response to long lines at the airport, promising more staff and saying government projections for return to travel were wrong, a different tone than the government initially took when they blamed out-of-practice travelers. One COVID change that is here to stay, though, masking. It will remain mandatory on planes and trains in Canada.
It is a minor inconvenience that we're asking travelers to endure that offers meaningful protections to themselves and to the passengers sitting next to them in a small enclosed space. I'm thinking of an immune-compromised person or an elderly person who's traveling.
You can watch our full interview with the Minister of Transport tomorrow on the West Block. Farah?
Look forward to it. Thank you, Mercedes Stephenson in Ottawa. The U.S. is teetering on a recession. Inflation is at its highest level in 4 decades. Gas prices are soaring, and the stock market is plummeting. As Jennifer Johnson reports, while President Joe Biden says a recession won't happen, many Americans aren't so sure.
From the grocery store to the gas pump, Americans are paying record high prices for just about everything they buy, and families are hurting.
My feeling when pulling up to the gas station is anxiety, stress.
Inflation has hit its highest level in 41 years. Grocery prices are up 12%. Mortgage rates have hit a 13-year high. But it's skyrocketing gas prices that are really hurting Americans. U.S. President Joe Biden is under increasing pressure to act.
I'm using every lever available to me to bring down prices for the American people.
As the president took a tumble off his bike in Delaware Saturday morning, a new USA Today poll shows his approval rating is tumbling too. Just 39% of Americans approve of the job Biden is doing. Democrats now control both the House and Senate, but that could change after November's midterm elections. Republicans are sending a clear message to voters.
It's time for the Biden and the Democrats to wake up and realize nothing is free. Somebody pays for it, and that's you and me as taxpayers.
The president blames big oil companies for price gouging and a global oil shortage due to the war in Ukraine.
Russia's war is driving up prices of gas. Everybody knows that. Hurting people in all our countries.
The White House also says supply chain issues from the pandemic are driving up prices on most consumer goods. But Americans are growing weary of excuses. The stock market is tanking, down 17% so far this year, crushing retirement funds.
We've pumped a lot of money into the system to try and bail ourselves out of a complete economic global shutdown due to the pandemic, right? That is going to take a while to unwind.
A different poll this week found 60% of global CEOs believe the U.S. will fall into a recession at the end of this month.
We are in the midst of what leads to a recession, which is you're seeing the consumer back off. Savings rates are now well below pandemic levels. We're reaching back to 2008, 2009 savings levels.
If a recession happens, it will be costly for consumers, the president, and his party. History shows Americans vote with their wallets, which these days are a lot leaner. Jennifer Johnson, Global News, Washington.
Coming up, the crowded contest to replace Jason Kenney, the key to gaining an advantage in the UCP leadership race. Plus, a major milestone for rock royalty, how Sir Paul McCartney spent his birthday. In Alberta, the race to replace Jason Kenney is taking shape, with 8 people running to be leader. But with a provincial election a year away, the United Conservative Party has little time to waste. And as Heather Yurex West reports, keeping this big tent party together through a leadership contest is not going to be easy.
I've informed the president of the party of my intention to step down as leader of the United Conservative Party.
It's been just a month since Alberta's premier stunned many with this announcement, and it's taken little time for the race to replace him to hit full speed.
Leadership of the UCP is a great prize. It's a party with tens of thousands of members, and expect that number to be probably hovering around 150,000 members by the end of this race.
Not to mention whoever wins becomes the premier, leading a province suddenly awash in oil and gas cash.
I am running to become leader of the United Conservative Party.
We must lead with strength and humility.
Together, we must revive, revitalize, and renew.
The field of candidates has quickly grown, with 8 so far in the hunt and a high-profile 9th waiting in the wings. Federal Conservative MP Michelle Rempel-Garner shared her intentions Wednesday on Twitter, saying, "I can confirm that I am giving a provincial leadership bid serious consideration. As such, I will no longer be participating in the federal Conservative leadership race so that I can focus on how to best serve my province."
It's difficult to imagine not running after putting it out there like that. So I think we can think of that almost as a soft launch for her campaign.
The United Conservative Party formed a government with a decisive majority in 2019. But under Jason Kenney's leadership, the UCP has had a difficult time, plagued by infighting. It's why this leadership contest has come with some ground rules. On top of the $150,000 entry fee, candidates must put up another $25,000 refundable compliance deposit to keep the hopefuls in line.
The trick will be to not create divisions that are wide enough that they cannot be healed by the new leader when this thing is ultimately wraps. We are on the eve of the next election.
The UCP leader will be elected in October, ahead of the provincial election early next year. Heather Yurex West, Global News, Calgary.
Ahead, the mental health of the modern dad. The famous father of 4 opening up about his anxiety ahead of Father's Day. This weekend offers a chance to celebrate fathers. And as you're showering them with love, there's a call to check in on their mental health as well. Many men simply won't talk about how they're feeling, afraid of being seen as not strong enough. Abigail Beeman takes us to an event called Father's Day on the Hill, hoping to address that stigma.
You guys excited? Yes. I've never heard you all be excited for school.
This Father's Day, HGTV star and dad of 4, Brian Baumler, hopes other dads will be open and honest with their kids, including about tough stuff.
I think if I'd had someone to have those conversations with, 25 years ago, that would have really shortened the amount of time that I had to deal with it.
Dealing with crippling anxiety that gripped Baumler in his 20s and 30s.
You'd get the tunnel vision and the grayed out and the extreme high heart rate and the sweat. And just the panic, the sheer panic of thinking, I'm going to drop dead at any moment.
Tearing down tough guy stereotypes, Baumler is opening up about his mental health, including at this Father's Day on the Hill event, backed by politicians of all stripes.
People are often surprised that, that guy was scared to leave his house. I'm like, that guy almost swallowed an entire bottle of Ativan just to stop the panic.
In general, stigma around mental health has been lessening, but the head of the Mental Health Commission of Canada says not so much for men, still less likely to talk about what they're facing for fear of showing weakness. Sadly, 3/4 of Canadians who die by suicide are men.
They may be more irritable, they may be consuming more alcohol or cannabis, they may be broody, they may be putting themselves out, they may be not seeing their friends that often. Those are all signs that things could be not well with them, and you need to reach out.
It was right after I had my second daughter and feeling incredibly depressed, not knowing who I could talk to, who to reach out to.
At least 1 in 10 men suffers from depression after the birth of a child, another issue less talked about.
We're all good.
Conservative MP Matt Genereux turned his struggles into advocacy. This event now in its 5th year with a new foundation called Hi Dad.
Providing a resource for men to go to really have those things at their fingertips, to be able to go and talk to other men, to know some of the statistics and make those conversations a bit more powerful.
And this Father's Day, any check-in conversation is a good place to start. Abigail Beeman, Global News, Ottawa.
How about skiing on Father's Day? While heat warnings are in place across some parts of the country, it's still ski season on Vancouver Island. Mount Washington Resort reopening the lifts this weekend for skiers and snowboarders. Now, normally by this time of year, the resort's mountain bike trails are the main draw. But with enough snow, the decision was made to restart one chairlift and a handful of runs for Father's Day.
And what are the conditions like? Heavy, slushy, and lots of fun.
The sun and the fun and time with my daughter. It's Father's Day weekend. We figure why not come skiing and dress up at the same time and make people smile.
For both days this weekend, the resort is giving free passes to all dads. Next, the cycling cellist, a British man's unique musical ride through the heart of the Roman Empire. What better way to celebrate your 80th birthday than being serenaded by Bruce Springsteen and 60,000 fans? Sir Paul McCartney's actual birthday is today, but he's been receiving well wishes for a while, including the final stop of his U.S. tour on Thursday night. On stage, Springsteen wished McCartney another 80 years of glory days, and it appears McCartney is not slowing down too much. His concert set list included a whopping 38 songs. Also, this next story is quite a feat. A British man has embarked on a 2,500-kilometer bike ride from northern England all the way to Italy. Now, every good journey needs a soundtrack, so he's creating his own. And it's not as simple or as small as just packing a smartphone. The musician is also entertaining an audience wherever he goes. Crystal Gamansingh has his story.
Sunshine, time, and endless opportunities. The summer of 2022 for Kenneth Wilson is shaping up to be a grand adventure of his own making.
There are kind of three elements to this. There's the bike, there's the music, and there's the story.
Wilson's story began at the northwestern frontier of the Roman Empire, Hadrian's Wall in England. It will end at the center of that ancient civilization, Rome. But like every good story, the in-between is where you find the magic.
Riding a bike is not very good for the wrists because you get so much shape to the handlebars, and that makes playing the cello very difficult.
Sustained strain took its toll on the body and the bike. And since this adventure takes place on the road, the odd, unexpected detour is to be expected.
I ended up 50 miles from where I should be, 2 hours before I was supposed to perform. And a man came out of his house and helped me and said he'd give me a cup of tea if I played him a tune. And he showed me the hairs on his arms standing up on end in response to this music.
Wilson performs because he knows the joy music brings. Sometimes he plays to a crowd, other times he is alone and just feels compelled, like when he rode past a Commonwealth cemetery.
I just got my cello out and I played to these rows and rows of white identical gravestones just because it seemed the right thing to do.
His sidekick, Libre, is always game. But why Wilson took his cello, grabbed a bike, and set off for Italy, he can't say.
If there were a straightforward answer, it wouldn't be so interesting.
At some point, the highway cello will become a book. For now, it's life, and the journey continues. Crystal Gamansing, Global News, London.
And as for most things in life, the journey is the reward. That's Global National for this Saturday night. I'm Farah Nasser. Thanks so much for spending part of your evening with us. Tonight's Your Canada is Lac Quenouille near Sainte-Agathe-des-Monts, Quebec. We love seeing your Canada. Keep sending us your photos. Until tomorrow, take care of yourselves and each other. Good night.